Well, thank you for coming tonight to the Old Pine Theater. This is the meet and greet for the Strong for School Board candidates. And if you haven't already, we do have some post-it notes. We're just asking that you put some positive and negatives on whatever you think when we're looking at schools or school district in Pine Island. And the question is up there. So the strengths and weaknesses do you perceive of Pine Island schools? Just listing some of those, that'll help us out and help us more communicate with you. So we are going to, in just briefly, a minute or two, have you all come down, sit. You can get refreshments throughout the night, and then we're all going to introduce ourselves, and we will go into the questions for the evening to ask you as our constituents. So thank you again for coming to the Old Pine Theater. We do have coffee, so if you want to get some coffee, it is out in the lobby. Can you see if it's picking up on the live stream without the mic?
Yeah, I have the house mic turned on.
So it will pick us up?
Yep.
You just might want to check to make sure it's clear. Or see if there's any comments. If somebody comments on the live stream, then you'll know.
There you go.
All right, well, we're going to do introductions first of each of the candidates. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself first. I am Ted Galati, and I am an entrepreneur in Pine Island. We own the Old Pine Theater that we sit in right here, and then we also own Willow's Keep Farm on Highway 52, where we have Hempmade, Minnesota, and Franklin Farm. And I grew up in a family that was very concerned about education. We went to school in Southern California. My dad ran for school board. He was on school board. He actually handed me the diploma as I walked across the stage at commencement, which was a really cool experience. So I've always been really concerned about education. I have a master's in education. I got that from Grand Valley State University, and then I have an undergraduate degree in sociology and anthropology, and then also in health and wellness. I did work in higher ed for a long time, and I retired most recently from the United States, from the U of M. Sure. So the University of Minnesota, I was the advisor for the occupational therapy and the medical lab science program, and enjoyed that, but wanted to fulfill my dreams of early retirement and being an entrepreneur. So I already had businesses going, and I just felt like that was the time for me to move into that. Why am I running for Pine Island School Board? I truly think that education is important. We all know that education is important. Hopefully you have all had good educations. And I feel like Pine Island, there are a lot of positives at Pine Island. That's why I'm here. That's why I moved here. That's why I moved my family here in 2013 and built a house. So obviously, and then that's also why I'm engaged as a community member, as a business owner. So obviously I'm concerned for the youth and their education. also taught community ed courses here, actually right here and right here, because we've done comedy improv and introduction to live performing acting on stage with elementary and middle school students. So that's how I've been connected with these schools. I also have 2 children that have attended Pine Island schools, went all the way up through elementary, middle school, and high school. And then I have 2 boys that actually attended Rochester Montessori, so I had that experience as well. One of my oldest one is actually off in Japan. He taught himself Japanese and decided that even though he got into lacrosse, that he wanted to go study in Japan. So he went to Japan. He's at an international school there, teaching English and going to college as a student in Japan. So again, the reason why I'm running is I want to just improve upon what we have here in Pine Island as far as education goes, and hopefully improve that even further. I think there's always room for improvement on myself. I hopefully think you on the community as well. I mean, it's a great place to live, and I just think we can do better. So that's really why I'm running for the school board position. Thank you.
You want me to go? Hi, my name is Vinod Raj. It's very nice to see all of you guys. I'm very new to Pine Island. I grew up in Sri Lanka. It's a third world country where education is a luxury. I wanted to go to medical college, but because of where I came from, I could not go to medical college. I got a scholarship. I went and did my medical college in Russia. I want to go back home and practice. I could not practice home because of a 30-year civil war. I went to Africa. I actually went back to Russia. I did my internship there. Moved to Africa. Worked as a physician there. I worked very closely with the UN. I worked very closely with community hospitals. I was a missions doctor there for almost 4 years. Then I started actually working with UN, doing a lot of research and stuff like that. I really fell in love with research, and I got married. I moved to the States. I did my master's in Michigan, and then worked very closely with CMS, did a lot of physician consulting, and made a conscious decision I would become a physician researcher than practice. Because I did want to spend time with my family. When I was working in Africa, I already was a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon. If I had to do that all over again, I had to spend almost 14 years before I could do what I was doing. I mean, it was kind of a re-education just because there was no system. For me, family is important. And I made a conscious decision when my daughter was born that I will make a career switch because family is very important to me. So I've spent the last 10 years in the States being a physician researcher. We moved to Minnesota. I was the director of data research. I was the director of care delivery research and infectious research. So we moved to Alina about 5 years ago. And during that time COVID hit, I was very much involved with COVID. I was the director of infectious research, so you can imagine that was a big part of that movement. And I had to recluse myself and my family because of the work I was doing. One day we were in a park and finally we were able to come out, and my son looked and said, he was 3 years old, he looked and said, "Oh, humans." And that's when it hit me, what a big impact that was to him as a little kid. That was the reason we moved to Pine Island. I wanted to move somewhere where they can be free, enjoy school. We have been here from August, and Pine Island schools have been phenomenal. Mrs. Nearing for Lianica was God sent. After summer, I'm very happy for her. I heard that she was moving. It really hurt, right? Education has changed my life. And so that was the reason I wanted to be involved and see how we could make sure the best education is possible. And we can always try for the best. We can always work for the best. So I have a lot of experience building teams, growing teams, and so I was like, I want to step up and help make a difference, and hence why I want to be in the school board and see if I can make a difference. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Ronkin. I moved here to Pine Island in 2017. And it's been a beautiful town to live in. I enjoy every minute of it. I've been all over the place. I've done many different types of jobs over the years, and I've learned from all of them. And one of the biggest ones I've done that I currently do now is I went back in 2014, got my degree in biomedical engineering. I went from driving a concrete truck to being a biomedical engineer. And one of the things that I want to see for the children is in the job I'm in, I see how important science and technology is. And I've loved technology since I was a kid. And so when I see scores are dropping and stuff, because I see science is dropping, all the other ones are dropping, and they all correlate together. And technology in this world is only expanding. And for everybody to be able to be successful, they need a good start where they can, get that education. And so, my reason for running is I want to, see if there's anything I can do to help change the course where the grades are going and where everything's going, and see if there's anything I can do to better that.
My name is Dawn. I'm not nearly as well educated as these gentlemen, but I grew up in a very large family, and I have 4 children, and I've always been very involved with children. My best friend had a ton of children, and so, throughout my life, growing up and into parenthood, children have been a passion of mine. I very much care about their well-being as far as safety is concerned, but also as far as their social and emotional well-being, that they're connecting with people, that they're feeling valid, as part of a whole, a community, and also that and also their educational well-being. I have 2 children who struggled to learn how to read, and that was difficult because my first one spent about a week in kindergarten, and she was reading signs down the street, and she was reading everything, and it was so easy. And then to follow that up with a couple who really struggled, and the solution for one wasn't the solution for the next. And so, each child being so individual, even just within one, family unit, and their learning having to be so particular, really just made me aware that, one, parents, we really have to be involved. We have to be willing to work with teachers and experts to figure out what they need, but also to help our kids do the work. And, but also to know that I couldn't always do it. I went back to work full-time, and, then I'm having to pull in friends and family to help take over those things and to help my children to continue with their success. On top of that, 2 of my children, one of them is an overlapping of the first 2, struggled with speech issues. My youngest, he had his own language. I remember when I met with our special education teacher, and she was assessing him for the first time. It was just so interesting to watch her write down the sounds that he's making, and then to look at her and say, I know that you heard these 2 sounds together, but if you have him repeat it, you can hear that he's saying 3 sounds together. And so working together with the teacher as she says, okay, Jay, say that again. Say this word. And he says it again, and she looks at me and says, you're right, that is these 3 letters all together. And so again, just that collaboration of, parents working with teachers and teachers working with parents, and bringing in people to help us with our kids, because we can't all do it on our own. The phrase, it takes a village, is overused, but is so accurate. And so I guess that is my passion in my heart. My heart is for the kids. We lived for several years in a Denver area, and my daughter actually started school there, and her first year was highly successful, and I loved her teacher to death. And I worked in her classroom every week, sitting next to ESL students who were primarily Spanish speaking, and just helping them to learn to read, listening to them, reading to them, helping them to, go through these different steps in the reading process, and watching them get to a place where they're feeling successful and they're loving to read instead of dreading it. And that is, I think, my second passion is when you get to see a child love to read. It is my firm belief that if you love to read, you can learn anything. You can do anything. But I have also heard so many stories that, as my friends tell me their story about them learning to read, my heart breaks because I am a reader. And they're like, oh, I hate reading. And I'm like, how can you hate reading? And their stories go back to their learning experience. And so, I remember telling one of my friends, I'm like, I'm so sorry that was your experience, because there's a whole world that you can experience from a book. And I'm so sad that you're missing that. So I am thankful for audiobooks, but I still think it's different to learn to read. Like I said, you can do anything if you know how to read. So, yeah, children, a passion of mine. And learn, that love of reading is a passion of mine, but also that community participation and the back and forth partnerships between parents and teachers and anyone else who's willing to help. So that is why I'm running, hoping to see those things come up.
So we definitely have some questions that we want to ask you, see how we can best represent you. If we can't get to everyone's questions, please bear with us. But we want to hear from you. There's various ways that we have that can connect with us. I know each one of us, we are happy to grab a coffee or anything and talk with you guys. I feel the board is to represent the community, so we want to go and represent that. So with that, let's go ahead and start off some of the questions, and we'd love to hear from you. I think something that I would really like to hear is, what do you believe the role of the school board should be? And so,
Matt, can you put up the question too? That's actually a question too. Kind of, our order got jostled here, so.
So love to hear from you guys. So.
Why don't you tell me what you think the school board role would be for you?
Yeah, for me, it is. I think a school board role for me is to be able to represent the community and be able to advise and bring. I always believe we can always be the best, and that means being able to get resources, be able to get the best coming together as a team. And I think as a school board, how can we best represent the community to get the best of that value? And that means hearing from the community to see how we can go and best represent that. And that's one of the things I want to hear from you guys, to see what is the best, what the best role should be for the school.
So you'd be open to somebody calling you and say, such and such.
Yes, definitely.
So Ted, you mentioned improvement, what we can be better, what can we do better? And I'm just curious if you can be more specific, articulating that point.
Yes, I mean, we have formal questions. We have actually one that I could put up there now. And we're going to be getting to, I guess my thing is, I'd like to talk about test scores at time. Right now, we're trying to stay on format because we really want to know from you. Again, we all have, ideas of what we can give to the school board. let me just, before I know you're gonna ask me, well, what would my interpretation be? Well, I lived in Hawaii for 10 years. In Hawaii, it's very interesting. For one, the school system's not that old, right? So since the 50s, so in the late 50s is when they started basically having public schools, because before that, there was a territory, then they went to public schools. In Hawaii, there's no school boards. The governor, all the schools are underneath the per se of the governor's office. So that's how they basically decide what the educational standards are. Would I like to see Minnesota go that route? I don't think so. I think that each community is different. I mean, we're a small community of 4,000 to 5,000 people, depending on where we're pulling these children into the schools. And if you look at Rochester, that's very different. So I think you need to look at the community, and then again, like Vino says, and all of us have said, we want to hear from the constituents, because yes, there's parents. Obviously, they're really hopefully engaged in their education of their students, but there's also grandparents that live here, and they may have children that go there, and then there's also just community members that live here. But again, I would hope that all community members are concerned with the education that the children are getting here in Pine Island. And plus, if you live in the area, you are paying taxes, and the levies keep going up, and we keep putting more money into schools, and that's great to see great new facilities, and we need new facilities, we need to refurbish old facilities. But again, we need to, I would think all community members would be concerned where their tax money is going. And then again, if you have issues or you want to see improvements upon the school, I think it's important that you voice that to us. And again, we have a question about the test scores. We will be talking about that a little bit here shortly.
Can you tell me what you think those test scores actually measure?
We will get there. Yep, and that's actually a dialogue that we want to have. So we will go further into that shortly. I will add, regarding the school board, and the beautiful thing about being a small community is that these are our kids. How many of you I've heard and seen say, I'm fourth generation, I've been here 12 years, and that is a beautiful thing. If there are children and you're invested in them, we're naturally going to want to be invested in their education. We're going to want to see them thrive. We're going to want to give them the best. And I think that's the biggest thing. What do you think the board can do to give these children, give our children the best? How can we impact that? Yes.
They can trust their teachers, and they can support their teachers, because their teachers are working really, really hard to better those kids. And I think and I'm just going to say this now because I don't know when you're going to get to it, and I don't know how long we're going to be on question number 2, but if you continue to talk about the test scores, I think you need to understand where we've come from in the past couple of years. So to base a lot of your concern on test scores that have happened over a pandemic and that are also indicative of test scores in other districts, very similar, situations, I think it's probably not something that is, I just wonder why that's kind of your basis if you're thinking about the fact that it's been 2 years of the pandemic and it is happening everywhere.
That is one concern. But again, we're talking a lot about not transparency, community involvement is really what we want to see. We want to see everybody come together.
How would you do that?
That is a very good question. I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I kind of to piggyback on her question, and the statements you made about wanting everything to be great or best for every child. I'm a foster parent, or I'm considering becoming a foster parent again. I'll be bringing kids into town that look like everybody else. I also work in Red Wing, and I have a lot of interactions with the Dakota tribe, which you guys are probably aware is probably going to be moving into town here. So I'm a little bit concerned when I see things that say removing culturally responsive linguistics and teaching and social emotional learning from the classroom. And I know what responsivity looks like in my field, and it's something we talk about every day. You know, how can we best reach the people we're trying to work with, and how do we best respond to their needs? So I'm concerned about the removal of culturally responsive learning. And that could just be that I'm misunderstanding. So I'm hoping that you can speak to me more about why that would need to be removed and what that does to improve the educational outcomes of the kiddos in our community. Because to me, frankly, that's very concerning.
So one of the big things, I guess, for me personally,
They
with,
can't hear you very well, maybe you need to take.
okay, where's the mic?
There's some sort of fan
These
blowing.
older ladies here.
Okay. Sorry.
I apologize. I have been told that I'm soft-spoken. I have a hard time yelling.
That's good.
Okay,
There we go.
good. I also hate microphones. It trips me up a little bit, so I apologize if I'm not as articulate. But one of the things I think that is more the focus than removing it altogether is that it not become a primary focus. That we do want to acknowledge differences, and we have to, because we're all different. But I guess I believe that everybody wants to be treated equally and fairly, and we have to understand where each other is coming from in order to do that. But I do think we have to treat each other with respect, and I don't know, you know, we kind of answered this each individually for the news record. I don't know, has that even come out yet? But one of the things that I guess I mentioned in mine is that you know, my kids learned at school, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated, and which is just kind of a rephrase of, you know, what Jesus of the Bible said, you know, do unto others as you would have them do to you. If we are truly seeking to love and understand each other, and being respectful of each other, and not allowing there to be, I guess what is the word I'm looking for? Even just that negative interaction between students, between teachers, if we're standing up for each other, I don't know that we need to have a whole curriculum devoted to that. I think we need to go back to the basics of human decency, and knowing each other, get to know each other, you know?
I guess maybe I wasn't specific enough about my question. Cultural responsivity linguistics, to me, that means that you're speaking to a specific culture and their ability to communicate with you. And I mean, the golden rule is nice, but when you speak to removing completely those things, I guess I'm wondering specifically what you're talking about when you say those should be removed from your classroom.
And, okay, so I'm gonna, cultural responsive teaching, and I know the teachers got a book that they read this last year. Did you read, are you a teacher in Pennsylvania?
I'm not
Oh.
in the district.
Okay.
I'm a teacher in a neighborhood here.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember the name of the title. I read it, or I should say I listened to it over audiobook, because I'm working all the time, so that's how I kind of get my information in. I listen to a lot of information in education. So I had a professor in grad school. It was multicultural diversity, and he said, "Teach me if you know me." What he meant by that, and he was a Latino gentleman, what he meant by that is you really need to know your students. And I hope as educators, because even, I mean, I taught, I was an advisor, I was, you know, involved at the University, why do I want to say United States? University of Minnesota for years, and working with students of all different diversities, some of which live in Pine Island, I still know them. So what I come forth with is as teachers, we want to know our students, and that is very important. Like the book that the teachers read here at Pine Island was talking about, you know, when you teach to, like you were saying with voices, when you teach to different people of different ethnicities, and I'm not trying to say that you could talk to this, but there is like a culture shock, right? You go into a new culture, and I'm sure Bino, he's been to Russia, and there's certain things in Russia you probably wouldn't do that you do in the United States, and vice versa. There's stuff in Russia you wouldn't do that, same thing. And that's the same thing when you're educating. When you're educating, if you educate with certain words and certain tones, in that culture, it might shut that student down, shut them off. So I think you do need to think about where their upbringing is. And it could even just be a student that's brought up in the Twin Cities versus somebody that's brought up in a small farm community. So when that child comes into your classroom, you really need to get to know them. In order to teach them, you need to know them. And you need to know what their family set is, if they, have extended family living with them, if English is a second language. There's all those things, or if they come from another country and how that's, changed them. It's important that you know that. So I don't know, like when you're bringing forth the question about getting rid of cultural responsible teaching, to me, and I know, so CRT, if you're going to bring that in, I guess that's different. I mean, that is different.
I understand what CRT is.
Yes.
I've worked with them.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's more the cultural responsibility that you need to understand. And I think hopefully educators are being trained about that now. They understand that. The differences that we all need that differences. We need that diversity. We want diversity in Pine Island. And that's just really what I want to see at the school, is that diversity is, celebrated. And that teachers do understand that, yes, you come from a different culture, and there might be those communication disconnects. And you need to, work together as a team. That's me working with the student working with me. And if we have community members and partners in that, that's what we need to really focus on.
So is CRT part of the curriculum now that you're aware of?
So are you talking like,
current curriculum in currently, like,
what, I guess critical responsible teaching, are you considering that as CRT, or are you saying critical race theory?
yeah, maybe you could clarify what you mean by CRT.
Well, I was saying critical race teaching, critical responsible teaching. That's what she had brought forth. So I wasn't talking about CRT
Right.
specifically.
So I just, again, I guess, it sounds like you guys agree that it's appropriate to use what I brought up. That your sites have said that you want it removed from the classroom. So that's just why I was seeking some clarification.
I don't know, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you just heard what I just said, teach me, right? You could say that's critical responsible teaching, right? I don't know, do you agree with that?
Are
What I
you
just-
saying critical? I'm sorry, I'm just having.
You're merging the two.
Oh, I'm sorry, my words are
I'm asking
cultural
about
responsible. So, yeah, cultural
adding
responsible
critical
teaching,
race
yes,
stuff.
and I guess the CRT kind of threw me off. So what I'm trying to say is, teach me if you know me is it's not critical race theory.
I know,
Teach me if you know me would be more on this cultural responsible teaching.
Right, and that's what I'm just saying that it's, on one of your sites, it says specifically that you wanted to remove those culturally responsive, linguistic, and teaching and social and emotional learning from the classroom. So that was my concern. But it sounds like you're actually in favor of these things.
Is that, I'm sorry, but where
It's a
is that?
screenshot, I can't.
I had a question similar to that too, and I was just, my question was why you feel as though social emotional learning and cultural sensitivity should be removed from the curriculum, as you stated on your website. So that was, I'll just kind of add on to that, because I also have a question about why you wanted to get rid of that, what was the purpose behind getting rid of that?
So when we speak about CRT, it's getting rid of that in particular would be critical race theory.
I know that,
But then when we're talking about social emotional learning and why we would prefer that not be in the classroom is just because it tends to get to be such a focus that it feels like it detracts from learning. In math, we learn math. In reading, we learn reading. In science, we learn science. And if we're trying to incorporate something that kind of umbrellas over everything and is in everything, it feels like it kind of waters down the purpose of what we're in those particular classes for. I guess that's my simple way of putting it.
Can you give me
And
an
then
example?
we're really way behind. So we need to keep moving on, really far behind. Should we?
What if this is what we want to talk about? These are the things we're concerned with, I think that's probably why we're.
Yep, and this,
About the role up there, what do you see as your role in curriculum?
What I see the role is, the biggest thing is, like I said, I'm all for culturally responsive teaching. I've lived all over the world. I've traveled all over the world. I've met many different groups. I've enjoyed them all. And we need to learn a little bit about everybody. That's the most amazing thing in the world, is to get to meet all those people and see all those people and learn their backgrounds. I love that. But like she was saying, when it comes to like the basics, math, in the math class should be teaching math. She stole my line. But
Have you seen that not happening in the school, and that's why your response is, let's change that? Have you seen that happening here in the classroom to feel that's a valid issue?
I've heard of it happening from some people that I know that are students and from parents. I haven't seen the curriculum. Is the curriculum even posted yet?
it's not posted, it won't be posted until October,
Yeah, the curriculum's not even posted, so we can't see what's being taught in the classrooms.
and that's one of our transparency.
Yeah, it's transparent. In transparency, that should have been posted before the school year even started. It should, the parents should be able to, parents, concerned community members, anybody should be able to go to that website and look at it and say, okay, this is the classes they're teaching. The curriculum's not posted. The parents have no idea what's actually being taught to their kids in school.
Well, that's not up to the individual teachers, though, that's up to the state standards and whatever the scope and sequence is in that school.
The school board actually does have control over which curriculums under an umbrella of acceptable curriculums that they choose to use. So technically, the school board did make decisions on which curriculums to use, and they did invite teachers to be a part of those decisions. So there was there was an elementary school teacher who presented what they were going to teach for elementary. There was a high school teacher who presented what they were going to, so the school board does have that final decision on approving what the teachers are putting forth for their desired curriculum.
But it has to go with the state standards.
Yeah, it has to be one of the state-approved curriculums, correct, yep.
And that is set by the Minnesota Department of Education.
That is correct. Right, yep.
So is the current school board performing that role poorly, or is it something you want to do differently?
It's not that they're doing it poorly, but it's that they're not, as far as transparency goes, it's never been, that information about what is being taught has not been historically available to parents. And now, just recently, they announced that they will make it available to parents, but it's still not going to be available until October.
And there's always room for improvement. I mean, everybody can, the better we can all work together, the better the kids' education will be. And there's always new minds that can get in there and give their ideas and be able to speak their minds. I love to see the parents have more input and more be able to talk to the school board more, be able to interact with the school board more so they can have a better vision of that.
And that is actually one of the things that, we would like to see happen. One of the changes we would love to see in Pine Island is that there is more community participation at the school board meetings. Come see what's going on. Come see what decisions are being made. Come talk about, what's going well and what's not. But, you know, I think the last school board meeting I went to, me and one other person were the only community members who attended outside of those who were required to be there. And that kind of made me sad. And that tends to be fairly typical. There's usually, if any community members, very few. And
What do you think you're gonna change that?
I want to make it, you know, I want us to get out. I want our school board, even if it's not us, you know, and that's another thing. It's okay if I don't get on school board. That's fine. I want these issues to be brought up regardless. I would love to get out, you know, to have the school board out in the community asking people to come. You know, if they're hearing something, you know, a good idea, hey, come to the school board. You know, I'm sorry?
Did you not know that you could do that before?
Yes, I did.
Oh.
But
You're saying other people don't know that?
it's a possibility that a lot of people don't. Or a lot of times they don't know when they're meeting or where. There were a couple of meetings that we wanted to go to and we didn't know the time. We couldn't get the information until like the day of. Yeah,
So the last board meeting that you went to, was that the only board meeting you've ever been to?
that was my first. Yep.
So why didn't you go sooner if you were?
Because I didn't know I could. Yeah. So,
I went to a city council meeting several years ago, and then I came in, I was the only community person, I just wanted to go.
yeah.
And I see in the paper when they meet, and they looked at me and they said, are you gonna run for city council? You know,
Yeah.
I think any of those meetings are open, and if you know,
Yep.
I think you're more new to town.
I'm sorry?
Are you more new to town? I know
Yes,
you've
I
been
am.
here a long time.
We've only been here a year, and during that time, we built a house. So we were fairly busy.
Pardon?
I said we've only been here for 1 year, and during that time, we were building a house. And I have 4 children, and I work full-time. And so it was a huge transition, living with other people and building a house. So no, I did not have a whole lot of opportunity for community
But you did
participation.
If you
Yep, but I did not know what was available. And then when I did know what it was available, it was a matter of trying to figure out, where do I go? What time is it?
Those things were never before enough, give people a time schedule to be there.
I'm curious what kind of effort you put forward to find out the information, so did you like put an effort forward to call or, you know? find
Yep,
out?
checking the website, calling. I was in the office one day, they still didn't have, you know, we asked for, you know, even the agenda so that I could look at it ahead of time and see what we're talking about, and that wasn't posted until right beforehand, and, you know, so these are just kind of some of the transparency things, like, it would be good for, but also partnership things, you know, we want to see the community involved. We want to see, we want to hear what our community thinks about our schools and what's happening there.
And one thing that I'd love to see is, you know, during school board meetings, I've noticed that you're not allowed to ask questions about anything that's on the agenda. I think it should be an open forum at times for people to, for parents to go in there to, you know, ask the school board questions and have the school board actually, you know, have a discussion going, not just the school board listen and we're not, sometimes we may not even listen, but to have a discussion right there. If there's, I'd love to see the students have a chance to attend some meetings to where they could voice their concerns and maybe their solutions on how to fix things that they don't like with the school.
And they did have a student body representative, correct, at the last one, I believe?
I've been to a handful of school board meetings over the past few years. I did not go to this. So I've been to the school board meetings, a handful of them over the past few years. I did not make that one this summer because I was trying to, and things get away from me at the farm. I don't always get there. If I'm on school board, I will make sure that I get to those meetings. But over the last few years, you go to the meetings, and they're supposed to be open meetings. And the board members get up, They walk down the hall. They discuss whatever they're discussing. They come back. They basically tell you what their decision was, and they adjourn the meeting.
No discussion allowed.
And so my experiences from those kind of really tells me that, okay, we need to be more transparent.
When I read the agenda in the paper, there is always a section of a period of time that says for public input. How does this not serve your needs?
Well, and I'm not saying, there might have been public input on that meeting. I don't really recall. But there were, but,
Every single time.
okay, yes, I understand, but are these my, I'm telling you my observations.
It says that there's public input on there, but as a parent, I've been to a couple school board
Mhm.
meetings, and if you ask a question that they don't want to answer, it's frustrating because they won't answer.
Yeah.
They'll say, okay, end of public input.
It's actually, I believe in their policy, I think I read that there wouldn't be open forum time. Isn't that?
You have to sign up beforehand, and then
Right.
you're allowed 2 minutes, and then, I mean, they can cut you off whenever if they don't agree with what you're saying, in my opinion.
I think the basis of the policy was that it had to be on the agenda to be discussed, which basically, in my opinion, unless they need to change the verbiage, maybe they can just change the verbiage. But to me, when I read that, I think, okay, there is no open forum then, because open forum isn't on the agenda. So that's a concern. And again,
Are school board meetings subject to the open meeting laws? Because I think that's kind of what might be dictated.
Yes, they are.
Okay, so I think, at least,
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
okay, I just asked if they were open, if school board meetings were subject to the open meeting laws, because I think that governs some of what you're speaking to, and yes, I agree the rules are cumbersome and they don't allow for open discussion, but I think that could be some of the reasoning behind these decisions that seem, I don't want to say punitive, but it does sound punitive, and that, so I wonder if it's a matter specifically of it's an open meeting issue versus that doesn't allow that flexibility.
Is there an issue that's saying that a parent can't ask a question of the school board and be able to talk to that question? Not just be shut down with, that's not on the agenda?
And I think it's that you're attending a business meeting, right? So I think maybe the input needs to be given in a different place, right? So like the meetings that you're talking about, they have a long agenda that they're trying to accomplish, and so that's why there's a set period of time that says, 15 minutes, and it will be divided among, and, things like that. But perhaps what you're talking about is that you would like a different avenue for input, because that business meeting is probably not.
So if it's a business meeting, how can they go and have a temper tantrum for 58 minutes and then come back and adjourn the meeting?
15.
Yes, they've done that before.
I actually just looked up the laws. It's actually common open meeting law myths. There's the Department of Administration Data Practices. There's like a whole bunch of myths. So the school board does not actually have a lot of those, what you would call laws. I can send a link to anyone who wants it.
I have a question for Vino. I've been reading that your group is concerned about transparency. You have all mentioned that. Yet you seem to be running as a united group. Will you continue to operate that way if elected, or will you exercise an independent voice and opinion if required to do so?
I think if you ever go into anything where you go to vote, if you vote as a block, I don't think that's a vote. Right? And just to continue on, I think all of us want to improve, right? Sometimes we get stuck in best practices rather than functioning and understanding what next practice is. Yes, we need to get validation from what was done well, but what can we do to move forward as next practices? I think if the pandemic showed us one thing, it was we're not doing something right. If we need to improve resources for the teachers, we need to find a way to improve resources to the teachers. If the board has to be transparent, do we need to create parent committees where the board attend and have those feedbacks? Do we need to have committees within the board and the teachers so that we understand what are the resources that are needed by the teachers? So transparency has a very large definition. So how can we go and improve on what we have? I'm not saying what the board is doing now is all 100% or 100% right or wrong. They're doing a phenomenal job with what they can, but we can always improve. And that is taking feedback from everyone and being able to take best practices to the next practice and merge it and take it to the next level. So that's how I see it.
And each one of you will be independent thinkers in that.
Yes.
We have differences of opinion.
Yeah,
in and
we
of
have the same core values, the same things we want, but we all have our own things that we will, like, we have different opinions, we work them out, and we don't work in a way to appease each other, we work in a way for the best way to help those kids succeed.
And the fact is, it's not going to be us four. You know, it's us four and whoever is already there. And we're not running to come and bulldoze what's happening. We're hoping to come in and fortify what's going well and to address what we would like to see get better. Again, you know, that desire for, yeah, we're doing good in these areas, but can we do better? Why wouldn't we strive for that? I think we all do. You know, we move up in our careers. You know, we move into a better home. We push our kids to excel. We can do that on the school board too.
I also think, well, Matt, can we skip to that chart? 'Cause I know that's one, and I want to just kind of, we're talking about the scores, and I know that one was brought forth, but that was a big one. Okay, so there's the chart. And this was Peter Grimsrud, he's the publisher of the news record, so those scores were posted in there as well. We actually knew about those scores, and some of you may have known about those scores prior to that article as well. One of the things I will say, exactly what I hear, is our students were traumatically affected by COVID. No doubt. Because all of them were at home for a long period of time. And you know how that affects young minds. It also affects all of us. And you're engaged, one day you're engaged with your teachers. The next day you're looking at them through a screen. And you're like that for pretty much a whole semester. And then when you went back to school, there were barriers, whether it's a mask or it's a plastic screen, there's barriers. We can look at these scores and we can say, yes, there's definitely, that's connected to that. Plus, I believe in 2020 they didn't even do the test, so there's a year that missed. So obviously, our students have been affected by it. And it's not just Pine Island. I mean, that article, it listed all the schools. But it's what's disheartening is you see those numbers drop. And kind of what Dawn said, if half of our students or 56 of our students are really struggling with reading, and we all know how important reading is. I mean, how you comprehend and how you learn is through the written language. There are verbal learners, there are visual learners, there's other learners. But I do think that we need to think about, okay, how did that affect a child that was trying to learn, to read and understand when 70% of communication is actually nonverbal, right?
Yeah.
So it's how you express yourself and how your lips are formed and all those things. So now, these students are back to school, but I think there's been that period of time when they've been really not as engaged as they could have been with the teachers. And it was a struggle for the teachers. I have educators in my family. And some of those, one of my cousin lives up in the cities and teaches up there. And it's a lower income, environment. And not all those kids have access to internet, access to computers. And so they were struggling just getting the works to them. And it was elementary school, so they had to get packets and things ready for the students. So now we're post-pandemic, or no more COVID, hopefully, and we're back in school. But what does that look like? We need to get these, students back on track. And that's really, talking, like, we want to pose that to educators. For one, is this a good reflection? Is Fast Bridge a better reflection? Or is no testing a better reflection? There is, we do need to measure academics and how well our students are doing, but what is a better tool if this is not the correct tool?
So I think an important thing that you also need to know a little detail, because I proctored some of those reading tests for the district that I work for.
Perfect.
There were kids that, and I think the onus needs to be on the students as well, there were kids that made it a game to see how fast they could click through the answers.
I heard that.
So I think you need to, you think about, and there's absolutely no, they have no connection with the results and why it's important, especially at that level anyway. So I heard you say in one breath that it's an important measure, and then maybe we shouldn't. So I don't know.
No, what we're asking
if
is,
it's a measure, if it's an important measure, when maybe you're saying testing at all should.
this is actually a question we're asking you. You're a teacher, what are your perspectives on the validity of these results? Like, how do you believe these are in representing, how accurate do you believe these are in representing Pine Island's student proficiency? And so what I'm hearing from you, if you're saying, kids are just clicking through it to see how fast they can go, it's not a good indication of our student proficiency then.
Right. But
So-
what I'm saying then is what your stance is, then you're saying that you're looking at these and are concerned about what's happening in terms of the curriculum and the teaching methods and the teachers. And I don't hear you say that it's not maybe big for kids, right? So
Yep,
maybe
and actually
some
that
of
is one of the things that we do have, or did have, I think it got taken down on our website, is holding students accountable for their portion of their academic success. And how do we do that? But again, these are all things that we as a community have to kind of brainstorm and figure out a way to do that. And so, one of the follow-up questions we wanted to ask teachers is, we already kind of mentioned, do these scores, show our proficiency? It doesn't sound like it. So would it be better for us as a school then to use our assessments from like FastBridge? I know they do it periodically through the year. My students come home with a little half-page thing saying what their score is and where that lines up with where they're supposed to be, and things like that. So are those things that we should be relying on more? And if so, we need to know that from teachers. We need feedback to say, the way we're testing, it's not showing our success.
And you don't think teachers are already talking about that, looking at those things?
But-
Because they are.
Okay, is that coming to the board?
That's not coming to the community.
Yeah, I haven't heard it in
As
the
a parent,
community.
I don't know that.
Yeah,
I think another factor that you have to put in there, it's not, the student's attitude, but you have to get in there with the parent's attitude.
yes,
I mean, I taught primary, I can't go home with those kids.
yes,
And be with them at night.
yep,
And then those kids come back to school the next day, and they brought the books back, they took them home, they brought them back, they never came out of the backpack.
yep,
And nobody has signed the reading log, nobody's done anything with them. It goes on day after day.
yes,
You can't go home with everybody.
right,
So,
yep,
it isn't just the teacher, it's such a combination of.
yes. And that is, again, that's why we're saying we want more community involvement. We want parents to be participating in their child's
But if
education.
they're not involved with that little one
Yep.
at home, how are you
And
gonna tie them
that is a struggle.
Yes.
It's individual, right? Right.
Solution.
Yeah, because they're
Yeah.
like I said, luckily I grew up in a family that really, that's what they did. They were educators. And so my family, it was important for us. And they helped us if we needed help. And they got us tutors if we needed tutors, right? So, but then you have other families where maybe the parents aren't as interested or with education. And so then that causes that struggle or that disconnect.
The biggest thing is personal responsibility at every level. The students, teachers, school board, community, they all have to be stepped up to be responsible for what is going on.
And I would say that also kind of brings us back to, teach me if you know me. If there is something going on at home, and they're not having anyone read with them, is there something we can offer them as a community? And that's one of the things that we want to talk about.
That's a privacy issue. You want to run into a big wall there.
Okay, and that's good to know. Yep. I'm sorry, Tricia, you've been.
Yep, I mean, your question there, what are thoughts on how to improve these results and increase student proficiency? I know I have a daughter with dyslexia, and the 100-book challenge was a struggle for her, because it was like every day she had to read, and it pushed her, and she hated reading, and she couldn't read, and we didn't find out she had dyslexia for a long time, and she had leukemia. And so that leukemia kind of stunted her reading because she was in kindergarten, just still going through treatment. And then we had to go through, they called in all the leukemia patients and they said, hey, we're doing testing to see if they have a learning disability. And then she was tested for 2 days and found out she has dyslexia. Well, that 100-book club or whatever, they had to read all those books, that really discouraged her from reading because it pushed her. She always felt like she was behind and it made her not want to read. I feel like some students, they need a different thing. They need something else than the 100-book club because that was a very struggle. So it's not like a checkerboard, every kid is the same. Some kids are like, I can't do that. That is not who I am. And other kids are like, oh, great, I love it. But not every single kid is the same. And that's the struggle with the school is they think, oh, every kid is the same. But they're not. In my daughter, she used to read the Garfield comics, and the teacher got very mad at her and said, you can't read the Garfield comics. But she had dyslexia, that's how she read. She looked at the pictures and she read so she could understand. Because with dyslexia, she couldn't read a book like other people. And so she still struggles with reading. And so that's a very big concern that I have as a mother of a cancer survivor who has dyslexia. And I think the 100-book club is not a good thing for our children.
I heard a similar story, so just give me just a moment here. And, I think that the hard thing is we're trying to meet the majority of learners, and a lot of learners are motivated through competition, but others are defeated by competition. And so again, teach me if you know me, if you see a student who's discouraged, maybe offer them something where their name isn't on the board. I know that I was a very shy student. I didn't want anyone knowing where I was at because if I am competitive. So if I wasn't first, it wasn't good enough for me and I would beat myself up. So again, knowing our students, but also that brings up the question, and how do we present that to the school? Like, how do we bring in resources? How do we connect parents with the resources at a young age or at any sign of struggle in an area, and how do we get them the help that they need? Again, partnerships though, it takes parents, feedback to the teachers. They're struggling at home. This is what she wants to read. How can we make that okay? I have 2 struggling readers, and it was the same thing. One of them only wanted to read if it was on an electronic device. And, we had to work around that. And one of them only wanted to read if it was a graphic novel version, which is, similar to your comics. But again, that collaboration between parents and teachers and that communication, that transparency can go both ways. We need to, if we're really concerned about our students, especially those in our own home, bringing those concerns to the teachers and kind of trying to figure out a way to address it. And then hopefully teachers will have a resource that they can point you to. And that's what we really want to figure out is what resources can we have on hand to offer parents when there are these kind of issues, and how can we provide those to just be there and be available for teachers to say, okay, I think this student needs an assessment for reading, see what the hang-up is, and then once you know that it's dyslexia, okay, we have a resource for that, here it is. Those are things I'd love to see just kind of naturally flowing through.
I guess I can speak to that because I have.
Oh, sorry, I forgot, I'm so sorry.
In primary grades, so
Okay.
we had at the beginning of the year and during conferences, a chance to instruct the parents how to work with their kids. So, okay, and you could see, as you work with the kids, if they're gonna be a visual learner, they can learn the sight words.
Awesome.
We use the 3 pathways of learning, visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic. So that was working with those kids who maybe had a learning disability,
Okay,
but
awesome.
to refer them for any additional, even it was very obvious that they couldn't even keep their eyes on print sometimes
Right,
because of physical limitations, not related to vision, but
right.
related to
Cognitive
cognitive
issues, yep.
You have to go through a whole series of interventions
Right.
before you can even qualify, and then
Right.
they have to do the assessments. So when you're in first grade, you have to do all these interventions, and you might not, even though you've been trying every avenue you have, you might not get anything done and into a program till March.
Right,
That's a lot of time lost,
agreed.
but our hands are tied there.
But how can we untie them? You know,
Well, but who is trained to come in there and do that? There
Exactly.
are- You know, you can't just pull a volunteer in and say, do this,
Yeah.
because there's specific training, or
mhm,
data privacy, if it's disruptions like you had.
yeah,
I mean, you can't lay a hand on a student to even keep them from running out of the room.
right, yeah,
You know, so there are things that, yes, you'd like to see change, but there are parameters you
Yes.
have to work in between. And it isn't always easy, which I think is why so many teachers are leaving the profession.
I believe
Because
it.
there's not support.
Yes.
There's not parental involvement, even when you ask for it.
Yes,
Even when you send the little things home, it would take 5 minutes to read it and you don't do it.
right,
How do you convince the parents the value of that if they want their child to be educated?
right,
You can't put it anymore on the teacher, like she said.
no,
You know, they say you can be more accountable. The only way you can be more accountable is you take them home with you. You know, that's it.
yes.
No, I.
And that is really where we're coming from, though, is we want teachers to have as much help and resources as they can. And I don't, you know, maybe it's a matter of brainstorming, looking at the budget and saying, you know, where can we get this particular resource? How can we pull that, you know, from the budget and make that happen? Did you?
Kayla, you had a question. You could
Yeah,
answer.
no, I just wanted to shed a little light. So 10 years ago, the school district, I work at the elementary, I've had all your kids if they go to school here. They invested in sending all of the staff members to professional learning committees and learning about like how to
Awesome.
team. And so every week, the teachers of a grade level are working together. Today, literally all day long, first block of the day when I had kids for an hour, all of the third grade teachers, the math interventionists and the reading interventionists were meeting and going over the FastBridge data and looking at, okay, which kids are we putting in to do one-on-one, tier 3, all of this sort of stuff. So it's happening.
Do you
and
have as
all
many
that-
hands as you need?
Are there, everybody who should be in that meeting was there.
No, I mean, do you have enough to cover all the students that have needs? Do we need more teachers? Do we need
Well, I
somebody?
don't feel like I have the knowledge to say I could tell you how to fix staffing, so I'm not gonna even do that. I'm saying that the question that arose is, are teachers talking about this and looking at the data? Yes. Every time, so there's fall, there's winter, there's spring benchmarks.
now that's gonna start target time and MIT time, so that everybody's getting the instruction that is at the right level for them. If it's a high flyer, if it's a kid who's like, oh, wait a minute, we're having trouble, like, regrouping in math, so like, we're gonna take the kids who need help with regrouping, we're gonna work there. So it does happen. It's not something like that we're gonna tell you guys all the nitty gritty of like, oh wow, we meet every 2 weeks, we talk about data and on the third week, we talk about social emotional things. Like, that's not stuff that I would normally think would get communicated to parents, because that's like the inner workings and the cogs of our school, that like, we're professionals doing the best work that we can, and this is how we do it, and it's the best practice, and if it turns out that in 5 years, best practice is different, we're gonna go to the next training, and we're gonna learn how to do the next thing. So it does happen. You probably just don't know about it because it's part of the like invisible machine of best practice that's just happening every day. Okay?
I want to
Do you
just
feel, or you can mention it.
No. I want to just add to what Kayla said, and I don't know your name, ma'am, and I really appreciate for everything that you shared. When I was working in Alina, exactly almost 2 years ago, we had some proposals to get the vaccine trials going. They basically said, this is not going to happen because we don't have the resources. Inside out, within 6 months, physicians started retiring because they were just sick and tired of just having to deal with extra effort. One of the biggest things I had to deal with was physician burnout. And I understand the needs and the resources that needs to get pulled to support those teachers. And it takes a village, it literally takes a village. And that means working with the communities, working with the parents, working with the teachers to make sure those resources are found. I believe Pine Island can be a blue ribbon school, but that means we have to work with everyone together. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. One of the reasons that was motivating for me to run is when I heard Ms. Nearing was leaving. I don't want to see that. I want to see our teachers given the best opportunity to do their job the best they can for our children so that our kids get the best. So that means if we have to move resources, if we had to find resources, we want to work and get that done. And if that means the board has to have separate committee meetings with parents, separate committee meetings with teachers, separate meetings with whatever resources need to be pulled to get those, that's what I want to be able to facilitate to do. So it takes a village, which means we need input from every side because it's our kids. When those kids go home, it's a responsibility of the parents. So does that mean educating them? We had to go to every different community, and it was churches, it was the Hmong community, it was the Somali community, to get their buy-ins. And how do we make that happen? We want to make sure our school is best serving our kids. And that means taking those best practices and also thinking what are the next practices to make that happen. And that's what I want to be able to facilitate. I don't know if I'll get to the board or not, but I want to raise those questions that I think we need to come together to make and collaborate to make it work, because that's how we're going to give the best to our next generation and provide for these teachers that have sacrificed so much. So that is my stand on how I want to go about doing that.
I just want to make one more, I have papers to grade, so I'm going to be up till midnight probably, but I appreciate your vision. I feel like I think you're going to be you're going to have to quit your jobs and probably do this full time if you'd like to be in all of these areas that you think you should be in. So I really think you need to think about the school board as it exists at the 10,000-foot level, and we hire people that we trust down the way to do those jobs. I've always trusted teachers in Pine Island to treat my own children that go here the way that I treat the kids in the school district that I teach. So I really think that you need to trust that that is happening and remain at that. This is where you're at. And when you start to get into these other areas and you kind of filter down, I think you're going to find it exhaustive and you're going to lose sight of the big vision.
The kid's future is worth it.
But is it feasible?
I just, I'm
You
not,
don't,
I'm
you
not
don't
sure.
know if you don't try.
Well, actually, I think we do know. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it seems, to me, micromanaging comes too much. And we have been a fantastic bunch of teachers. And I think the boards, generally the boards, I mean, there's only so much time in the day. You can't, it just, I understand what she's saying, and I just
Yeah.
don't see how it would be feasible for you to be so closely involved with the everyday oversight of the school's function.
Just a response to that, I have neighbors that are teachers, and I have friends that are teachers, and I have coaches that are teachers, and coaches that I know in Pine Island. And I want to see it just be more of a supportive, collaborative effort and partnering with the community. So if I were on the board, that's what I would be doing. I would be wanting to be more collaborative, more, supportive, and trying to partner. There's a lot of these resources. I mean, we have retired teachers. We have other community members that definitely could help. And if volunteers are needed, there's that opportunity. But I also think just them being supportive of these children that are learning, and the teachers, because the teachers need resources, and that's what I hear a lot of this is, even if you just look at COVID and what happened there, now the students are full-time, and what other resources can we tap into? How can we improve that?
And so along that line of being supportive of teachers and everything, I also noted a thing on one of your statements about you want it published what teachers are and are not union members, or did I read that incorrectly?
I don't believe so.
No.
No. We mentioned that we'd like for all teachers to,
just to know what's available to them as far as, a lot of teachers, well, this is what I heard anyway, didn't know that Minnesota is a, what is it called again? Right to work state, yeah. And that there have been teachers who are union members because they believe that they have to be. And so we just want that to also be transparent, like what the options are for teachers. That, this is what's presented to you as a union member, but this is also what it costs you. This is what, your options are if you go the right to work route, and what that costs you. So just, again, that transparency of allowing teachers the opportunity to know what is available to them on both sides, and that way they can choose, what they believe is best for them.
I'd like to make a comment about that. I have worked for Education Minnesota. I've been a union member for a long time. I was even president of the local teachers union at one time. And you need to understand that Education Minnesota's main goal is about students, and it is about education. And promoting good working conditions and good wages for teachers is also a part of getting good education for students. And I understand, because I saw all of your pictures on the Minnesota Parents Alliance as endorsed candidates, and I'd like to read you a quote from the woman who founded that organization. She said, and I quote, "For too long, the voice of Minnesota parents has been drowned out by the demands of powerful interest groups like the teachers union." It was very, very anti-union, very, very anti-education Minnesota. And I'd like to know how you mesh that with your statements that you are an advocate for teachers.
So I don't know if you saw our post today, but we are not affiliated with Minnesota Parents Alliance.
Then why are your pictures on there?
They endorse us because we have some of the same core
website?
values.
So, yep, and again, you can go and look at what we wrote, but they endorsed us because we did agree with them on one thing, that parents should have, that they want to encourage parent involvement. And we have not, outside of that, that is all that they require for us to be supported by them. But that doesn't mean that we necessarily agree with everything that they have on their site. They endorsed us, it's not the other way around. So
So you're saying that you're part of this group and you're endorsing.
we're
it,
not
but you
part
don't
of the
agree with
group.
anything they have to say?
We're not part of
I
the
don't
group. They
understand.
chose to present us to parents as a candidate who would back parental involvement. And that is the sole purpose for our photos being presented that way.
We have received no training, no mentoring, no funds from them. They gave us their endorsement for that simple reason that we are, well, parents, parental involvement be the
But,
forefront.
and again, well, and that's not, I guess that's not even my opinion. So in that we differ a little bit. We want partnerships. And we know that parents are a huge part of that. Like you mentioned, you send the child home with books and they come home not doing their stuff. So part of our desire is to see partnerships between teachers and parents, teachers and community members, parents and the school board, all of these different things coming together. But because we do back parental involvement, they support us. And I think, and again, that is their perspective. Their perspective is that parents are not as involved as they should be, or not even, I think it's even that they're not even allowed to be. I don't know exactly, but that is not our sole focus, and that is not our, where we're coming from.
I do have the.
And as an educator, I know that you're not paid what you're worth. I was an educator. And unfortunately, that's why I'm not an educator anymore. And it's sad, right? Because I like to educate, and I still do educate. I educate about different things now. But unfortunately, that's also that burnout you talk about. So I'm not anti-union. I'm not sitting here saying I want to take away teachers' rights. I'm not saying I want to, there's a purpose for the union. Teachers decide to unionize, and the reason they do that is so that they can support one another, and also, like you said, support education, right? And it's important that we look at that. I know Walls just pumped a buttload of money. I don't know, it was isn't it $1 billion? What is it exactly? But hopefully that money comes down to the educators, right? Because what's going to keep teachers in the classroom? If they're dealing with disruptions, if they're dealing with, these test scores, if they're dealing with all this stuff that just creates stress and anxiety, it's not healthy for the teacher, right? So then the educator says, I'm going to go look somewhere else. And so again, it's important that we look at that and we say, okay, and if we're on school board, if we have that ability to say, okay, we need to pump more resources here, we need to do that.
I think the concern probably, sorry.
Just a quick one. I've been in the community for a long time, since 1971. These are my teachers over here.
Awesome.
The school board election obviously is going to be a pivotal one. There's nine candidates running for 4 seats. There's the event on Wednesday night is open, it's a forum conducted by the educators. Is that an event that each of you will be attending, or I'm curious?
Unfortunately, I am not able to attend, and the reason is I had a prior engagement. I am a theater guy. I'm sitting in the theater. But a very good friend of mine, when I was performing in Hawaii, my first stage performance was West Side Story, and I acted with this young gentleman there. He moved out to New York, he acts on Broadway, and now he's in Viet Gone up at the Guthrie. And I was given comp tickets, and I'm not gonna miss that. I haven't seen him for 15 years. I'm going to the Guthrie to see him. I do think that, and I'll hand it over to Vino, but I think Vino is going to be at that. Not that he's speaking for any of us. I mean, we all are individuals on the ballot, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that.
I'm going to do everything humanly possible to come. I'm actually working in the Twin Cities that day. So given everything works out fine, I will definitely make it there.
Yep, I did also have a prior engagement. So as I mentioned on our Facebook page, you know, I've gone back and forth. Do I break that commitment? That's hard for me because a commitment is a commitment. So, but I do see the value in this forum, and I'm still considering it. I have a hard time breaking commitments.
My answer has been the same. I work in the cities. I typically don't get back home to Pine Island until 7 o'clock at night. I wish a meeting would have been scheduled for a different time. I won't know if I can get out early that day until I see the workload that morning. If I can get out, I'll be there. If I can't, I can't.
One of the things too is that some of us are struggling with, we haven't seen it before, is really the whole concept of running as a team and what that means. Can you maybe expand on how you met and who's at the center of that affiliation?
We share property lines.
I guess one thing, okay, and we've just had this discussion, I guess last night a bit. So yeah, we're kind of pooling our resources, right? So we're all together, united to be on the school board. Does that mean all of us are going to get elected? No. Maybe 2 of us, maybe 3 of us, maybe none of us. But we just decided that, okay, we're going to take this approach. We have some common ideas. And so we said, okay, let's take this approach and run as a team. Now, some of these schools are running as a slate. I call it more as a team because we are all individuals. We are all going to, once we're on the board, we're not going to be just like all the same. That's not really what we are coming forth to. We work well together. So if we work well together and we are elected, or some of us are elected onto the board, we know we can work well together. We have friendships that we've built over the summer and as we started this journey. Some of us came to the table quicker than others because I really didn't, I didn't know if I was up to do this, and to be personally, I have a lot of things that I'm working on. But then again, I look at children and they mean a heck of a lot to me. And it's not just my children, it's everybody's children. And I want to really provide the best and provide the best that we can as a community. So I guess that's like what we were talking about. That's really what kind of brought us all to this. But we also know that we are individuals, and we have a Facebook page, and that Facebook page, we're all admins on there, and we were talking about it last night. If we post something, we need to sign it because otherwise you don't know.
Right.
If I said that, if Vino said that, if Kevin said that, if Dawn said that. And that's really confusing because then you're like, okay, who's saying this? And so we do need to make sure that we clarify, okay, this is myself saying this, or this is Vino saying this. Because that's important as you as a constituent, that's transparency, right? That's, you know who it is. And so we all are, unified to run together, and that's the approach we took. I could have very easily just said I'm going to run as an individual for school board. And maybe I could have done well in that race, I don't know. But it was a choice that we made. I know that, again, it might be confusing to the public or to whoever, because they're like, why are they running as a team? And, on the ballot, they're going to be individuals. But it does come down to, if we have these core values that's envisioned, then that's what we chose to do.
I think it was just interesting to me because there's several other communities that are running like 3 seasons, 4 seasons, specifically now. And I hadn't noticed anything like that before. Maybe it's happened before, I'm sure it has. But off the top of my head is,
Yeah, I hadn't seen that before either. It was a new concept to me.
Yeah, it's like all happening.
But it was really helpful for
Yeah,
me.
because I don't know, I mean, would you have run on your own? Would I have?
Right, I wouldn't
don't
have.
It's nice to have support structure. We work off each other, we learn from each other.
Bounce ideas.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering why now. It seems it's just such a common thing.
Because it's a new idea.
And we all see kids succeed. It's our biggest goal.
I have a question for you. Have you joined the PTO, the Parent Teacher Organization, and have a voice in that? And
I've worked,
participant?
excuse me, I have like a frog in my throat. So here at the Old Pine Theater, we've actually worked with PTO and we worked with them to do school dances just as a fundraiser. And we brought kids in and done school dances. I am also, we do at Friday at the Farm, which is our haunted attraction that we do every year. We have a lot of actually students that partake in that. But the other thing that we're going to do this year is we're going to work with the PTO to do a fundraiser for them, it's called a Lights On presentation. We've done these in the past. During COVID, we did not do it. But we're going to bring that back. And the Lights On presentation is for younger, it doesn't have to be if you don't want to be scared at night, you can come during the day presentation. But we do that typically, we've done it 2 Saturdays. That's what we typically did before COVID. But we are bringing that back for Sunday, October 30th. And the whole purpose of that is to raise funds for the PTO. But also it's a family-friendly event. Parents bring their kids out, they walk through the attraction and all the lights are off. We have actors that are not in gore, they're just in fun costumes handing out candy. And that's also going to be an opportunity for us to, again, meet parents, meet the children, the students of Pine Island and other surrounding areas that have young ones that want to partake in that. So again, I'm not actually a member of PTO, but I've worked with PTO, and it's a good organization, and I support them fully.
I just know they're very supportive
Yeah.
and working together, the carnival and the other stuff they've had over the years, which,
Yep.
helps support.
Yep, I recently ran across something where it kind of outlined, a bunch of the things that they do and what their funds go for, and I looked at that and I was like, that is also something I need to be a part of. But again, I've been here a year and I've been building a home. So I am almost done painting the house, which is great. But yeah, I would love to be a part of that, regardless of whether I'm on school board. I think that that's important. And I have been on PTO in other schools in the past. So. It is getting late and we are actually past our end time. But we want to thank you all for coming and voicing your concerns, voicing your questions, and also participating with us with our questions. Again, we want to know what you guys want and what your expectations are. So thank you for sharing with us tonight and for being patient with us. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
This is a first for all of us. So
Yes. So.
And please feel free to, approach us. I mean, that's, I want to hear, what your concerns are. Whether it's your concerns for me serving as a school board member, or what your concerns are as far as the school goes, or any of that. That's important for us to hear. And like Mino said, if you want to discuss it over coffee, or you want to call us, you want to email us, I'm open to any of that. I'm also up at my farm 7 days a week.
Stop in and see him. Most evenings I'm available, but I work full-time during the day, so. And I hate email, if you read my bio. So call me, set up a meeting with me, bring your friends if you want, that's fine. But email might work for them, but it really, I'll try and do it for you guys, but it's a struggle.
Thank you again for coming
Yes,
out.
thank you again for coming.
Appreciate it.
Grab, a cookie on your way out. Have a wonderful evening, guys.